Hi, everyone. Something happened to me, and I think it's important that I talk about it. And it involves the fawn response. I want to let you all know that I am not a therapist, and I am just speaking from my own experience. What happened made me reflect on the fawn response and how our brains react in unexpected and uncomfortable situations. This happened to me in a place where I normally feel safe, which is what makes it so unsettling. It started out completely normal, just small talk. The person I was interacting with was being friendly, giving me a few compliments, and at first I didn't think much of it. I responded politely like I always do because that's just how I am and that's just how I react in these situations. The conversation seemed harmless. The compliments turned into more personal questions, ones that made me feel very uneasy. It was subtle at first, but before I could process it, the conversation had gone from polite to intrusive. Then came a comment that really unsettled me. This person casually mentioned how easy it is for people to hack into security systems and how they've heard stories of people gaining access to private spaces without anyone realizing it. It was said so casually, almost as if it were just an interesting fact, but something about it made my stomach drop. And yet, in that moment, I didn't react the way I might have expected myself to. I didn't shut the conversation down. I didn't challenge what was being said. Instead, I found myself nodding, keeping my tone neutral, maybe even forcing a small laugh. Anything to keep the situation from escalating. My brain wasn't thinking, this is wrong, I need to leave. It was thinking, just get through this. Keep them comfortable so nothing gets worse. It wasn't until later, after I was away from the interaction, that I fully processed what had happened. It wasn't okay. This was threatening, even if it wasn't framed as one. And why didn't I say something? Why didn't I walk away? That's when I realized I had defaulted into the fawn response. For those who don't know, the fawn response is a trauma response where instead of fighting back, running away, or freezing, we instinctively try to appease the other person. We prioritize making them feel comfortable, even when they are the ones making us uncomfortable, because on some level, we feel is the safest way to get through the situation. This is something I've experienced so many times before. I have a malignant narcissist stepmom. I survived my entire childhood and, most of my adulthood by going into this fawn response. And I know so many others that have gone into this mode and have learned it as a survival mechanism. Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it until it's over. I want to share this because I know I'm not alone in this experience. I had never even heard of the fawn response and I learned about it recently. And I noticed that sometimes I default to this state. And I think it's important to talk about what happens after the feelings of regret, frustration, or even self blame that creep in. This is something I'm experiencing even right now. I I honestly, when the situation ended, I was texting with a friend and talking about how I felt so I'll use the words that I said. I said, "I felt so dumb, and I talked about things I didn't wanna talk about, and why did I say this, and why do I always open my mouth and talk about things that I don't wanna share with other people?" Well, what happened to me was predatory. This was someone who was skilled at starting off making it seem like things are great and comfortable and escalating to the point where you don't even know what happened. But here's the truth, reacting this way doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't mean that you're you failed. It just means that your brain did what it thought it had to do to keep you safe. So I want to talk about this. Let's start off with what is the fawn response. We've always heard of the fight or flight. I think some of us have also heard of freeze, but there's another one called fawn. I didn't even realize this existed. And, drop it in the comments if you've also never heard of this fawn response. And this happens when someone tries to appease or please a perceived threat in order to avoid conflict or harm. Instead of standing up for your oneself, which is fight, or leaving the situation, flight, or becoming paralyzed, freeze, a person instinctively seeks to de escalate the situation by making the other person comfortable, even at their own expense. It sounds a lot like people pleasing to me, and I know that that's something I struggle with for sure. So, why does this happen? It's a learned survival mechanism from past experiences, including childhood trauma. So, for example, if you grew up in a household where speaking up led to punishment, and to tell you the truth, I know I did this in my childhood. I didn't meet my stepmom until I was 8 or 9 years old, and I already had the fawn response then. So, I don't know what happened in the years leading up to that, but that has always been my go-to to de-escalate the situation, to be sweet, to be submissive, to appease the other person in in fear, like, it's done in fear. It's like at the moment, you know it's uncomfortable and you're just trying to make it through. This also happens when you've experienced narcissistic A, when you've constantly walked on eggshells in order to avoid angering the narcissist. So this can happen in your childhood, in your adulthood. It becomes a learned mechanism. It can happen if you've encountered dangerous situations. And what's happening here is that the brain perceives the other person as a threat and subconsciously decides that keeping them happy, pleasing them, is the safest way to avoid harm. So, how did this play out in my experience? What happened was this person made inappropriate comments and mentioned that my home security cameras could be easily hacked. I reacted by not challenging, not leaving, not confronting. I even answered some of the questions. I felt frozen, but I also went along with the conversation. And now I realize that was a fawn response. Afterwards, honestly, I didn't realize what it was until I said it out loud to a friend. And that was when my friend said, "This person is a predator." This person started out with benign questions to make the situation feel comfortable. So I fawned because my brain prioritized making sure he didn't escalate rather than asserting myself or shutting him down. I have to tell you though, I'm very proud of how it ended because there was one particular question. And when I say inappropriate, this is a severe underestimation of the questions that were being asked of me. And I don't even want to say what was being asked, but believe me, it incredibly personal, private questions. So as I was saying, so there was one particular question he asked 3 times, and I, like, circled around the question. I tried to avoid the question, I brought up something else to try to avoid the situation, right? And finally, when the last time it was asked, I said, "I don't feel comfortable with that question." I'm so proud of myself that I set that boundary, and guess what happened? As soon as I said that, this person had to all of a sudden leave. So it was like when I asserted my boundary, this person knew there was no more, this couldn't keep moving forward, and this person left. So, how does this happen, or does this look like in narcissistic relationships? So, many survivors of narcissistic A, they fawn because standing up for themselves in past relationships could have resulted in punishment, emotional withdrawal, or manipulation. And this could look like, agreeing with the narcissist in order to avoid rage or the silent treatment, over explaining yourself in an effort to avoid accusations or criticisms. And in fact, this is something that I sit with all the time. It's okay to sit in silence. It's okay if you're with someone and the conversation gets quiet, because what I notice happens is that I'll try, because it might feel uncomfortable, I might try to answer the questions or bring up things that are giving more information to this person who's collecting data or whatever else they're doing that is going to be used against me at some point, right? So I think I do that all the time now. I try to remind myself it's okay to sit in silence with someone, because when you talk, or when I talk, I end up over explaining things or giving away information that doesn't need to be given. You might also downplay your own discomfort to avoid conflict, and it's people pleasing to the extreme. And unfortunately, the longer a person is exposed to this, the more automatic this fawn response can become. And I've had it my whole life. So, um, I created this channel to start talking to people about what it's like being in these narcissistic A relationships. And I've experienced it a lot in my childhood because of my family. And I also married a narcissist. So I know what it's like in a romantic setting as well. So how do you recognize this and interrupt it? So recognizing it in yourself. You feel like you freeze, but also find yourself engaging with the person rather than resisting. And the thing is, like, In that moment, it felt wrong in my body. In that moment, I knew I was uncomfortable, but it was like I was bypassing that signal, you know what I mean? And, my gosh, it's like I say I really actually wanna write a book about what it's like feeling something in your gut, and it's so interesting to me that the neurotransmitters that are in your brain, like dopamine, serotonin, those neurotransmitters are also in your gut. So literally, the gut could be almost considered a second brain because the same type of chemicals might be causing these um, feelings when you feel like you might be prey. And I think it's so important to be able to listen to our bodies and recognize when we're uncomfortable. So you could also see that you're agreeing or laughing at inappropriate comments to avoid confrontation. You downplay your discomfort or convince yourself it wasn't that bad. And you feel exhausted after the interaction, realizing you prioritize the other person's feelings over your safety. And I have to tell you, this is so true. This is so true. Megan's show came out yesterday. And this whole thing has thrown me for such a loop that I literally don't have the patience to watch it. I don't have the patience to make these videos where this is something I love to do. I'm seriously like physically exhausted. And you know what else it feels like in my body right now? You know, when you're just really hungry and you feel weak? That's what I feel right now. And I felt it like all day today. So, how do you stop this cycle? You pause and check in with your feelings. Do I actually feel safe? And this is something that takes practice. I know I'm saying this to you, but I don't do this and I want to start doing it. Give yourself permission to walk away. You don't owe anyone engagement. Set boundaries, even if it's awkward. That's inappropriate. Please don't say that. I'm really proud of myself for asserting my boundary. This is actually a sign that I have grown over the last few years. And I'm going to keep saying that to myself. I'm very proud of myself. I stopped the interaction. Who knows how worse it could have gotten, even though it was pretty bad, honestly. And another thing is practice responses in advance. Have go to phrases ready that can help in future situations. This is so important because there really is such a thing as muscle memory. And I'll give you all um, some examples. I teach a lot, and it's so much easier to teach when the words are like automatic and you don't have to think about them than when you're teaching and you have to explain and think about everything you're saying. So, practicing talking those things and literally saying them out loud because it's muscle memory. Your mouth has to move, the words need to come out. You need to practice hearing it so that when you encounter a situation, it's automatic and the words come out and you assert your boundary in a safe fashion. Okay, so how do you recover? And this is something I'm struggling with right now. I'm practicing and I'm doing my best. So it's first is having self-compassion. You're not weak, you're not at fault. Your brain made a split-second decision to protect you. You could journal or process, write down what happened, how you felt, and what you wish you could have said or done. And practice boundary setting. Start it in safe situations with friends, coworkers, people you know, so it becomes easier in high stake moments. And of course, remember, if necessary, take action. If this is something that can be reported, go and report it. Take any safety precautions you think you need to take. And let me tell you, I have taken the precautions that I need to take. Okay, so what to do if you experience a fawn response in the future? If you realize you're in this situation, it's okay to course correct later. You can still set boundaries after the fact. If this person is someone you regularly interact with, work on gradually boundary enforcement to shift the dynamic. And if you feel unsafe in the moment, focus on exiting the situation safely first, then process and take action later. And again, I want to remind you I am not a therapist. I am not trained in this. This is just what my experience has been. And this is the research that I've done online that I'm just repeating back to you. I'm considering doing a live stream where we have a conversation about the fawn response. Please drop it in the comments if you think that that's something you would be interested in or would like to participate in. If you feel comfortable, feel free to share your stories in the comments. If you've never heard about the fawn response, please drop that in the comments too. I'm really interested to know in how many people have heard of this before. So if this was interesting to you, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll know when I drop new videos. This video was very different from what I've done previously, where I normally talk about Harry and Meghan and spotting narcissism in mostly romantic relationships. But these are the types of things that I think we need to have open conversations about. Knowledge really is power. I want to thank you all for listening. I appreciate your support. You guys, I love you all so much. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.